let's go into schools and how they deal with discipline. So, and what forms do they normally use? I mean, we have expulsions, we have suspensions. What are the other forms that we have, and what are the consequences for those?
I think one of the greatest moves we made was to get rid of zero tolerance. That was a silly idea. But I think most schools are still capitalizing on that punitive response. If you do something, I have to take things away from you or put you in a place that like in school suspension is just turned into a corral of kids that aren't really doing anything academically or learning from their behavior. Suspension is just silly, especially with I think home dynamics being so different than what they used to be. I always tell my teachers, I was a pretty rough kid, and I lived on my own through some of high school. Moved out my junior year, and I said if I knew that I could get suspended for 3 days every time I told a teacher to f off, I would just come in every Tuesday, and at the end of the day, I would tell a teacher to f off, so I could have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off. Because then I would just hang out at my house and watch TV. We didn't have a lot of video game systems back then, but watch TV or run around town and get up to no good. I was like, that would have been great. I would have figured out how to manipulate that system perfectly. So I think that the biggest thing that is missing in discipline is to take the discipline out of it and just call it learning. We're going to learn from our behavior. Are there going to be, I get this a lot when I do restorative practices because they'll say, so that just nothing happens to them. No, they may have to do a restorative project. I had a couple of kids do a restorative project last week, and we had them watch a bullying video because they were bullying a kid. And then we had them sit down, and we came up with a series of questions that we wanted them to answer in written form. And then we sat down and went over those questions with them and talked about the long-term and short-term effects of bullying and the effects it has on people psychologically, and had them put themselves in that position. Like, how would you feel if that happened to you? And come to find out it had for, one of them was like, I've been there. And I'm like, how'd it feel? And he's like, it sucked. And I was like, you created kind of a sucky environment for another kid. Like, you remember how that felt? You just made somebody else feel like that. I don't want to make you feel guilty or bad about yourself. I'm just saying you have empathy towards that. You understand what that's like. And then doing a restorative conversation with the student and saying, now that we've talked about these things, they understand what was going on. I'm going to sit down with all three of you. And I felt like that was far more effective than me bringing them in here, yelling at them about bullying, making them do, some punitive thing. They wouldn't have learned. Now, can I make kids, I've had kids draw on desks, and so I've had them clean all the desks in the school. And somebody might say, oh, well, that's not okay. Well, no, it is, because now they understand what it's like to have to be the person that has to clean up their writing on the desk, So not everything has to be punitive. We don't live in a world where we can paddle kids anymore, and that was never effective anyways. That was more trauma-inducing than anything,
19 states still allow corporal punishment.
I think I taught, I won't say, but I think I was in a state that did that, but we definitely never used it. But I got whipped as a kid. I got paddled 3 times in front of my entire class, and I mean, it was embarrassing. It's humiliating to be whooped in front of the whole class and then sent to sit at your desk. Especially as a 4th grader. But that's what they did back then. And I think that we have to be more creative and more understanding and teach kids to learn from their behavior, because if I can learn to act differently, and if I can learn that my behavior affects other people, then I can change my behavior. Now, I know the argument would be about, well, what about the kid who doesn't care? Well, I can't make you care, okay? But I can at least, I used to tell kids all the time, like, I can't control you, but I can control your environment. And if that means that I have to adjust your environment and maybe make you work with me for a couple days where I'm not mean to you, I'm not evil to you, I'm not super entertaining, but we can work one-on-one. And, maybe if you're struggling being around other people, you can be around me, and we can talk about why you struggle being around other people while you also do your math, English, science, social studies, history, So I think we have to be more creative And I think we have to stop having that expectation that if I send a kid out of my classroom, they should come back crying, or there should be some huge consequence, or I should feel good or feel happy because something bad happened to them. Because that's the expectation. They were mean to me, so punish them. Why not figure out why they were mean to you? And what does mean look like for you? And why have you never explained that to the kid that we're not going to run into kids. I've worked with a lot of kids, and I have come across very few who were truly like just sadistic. It's not that common. Is it? Yes, there are some pretty severe mental health issues where kids can be very cruel and mean, but I mean, it's so few and far between. 98% of your kids, I just made that statistic up, by the way, are going to be probably decent human beings that can learn from their behavior. And the earlier you start it, the more empathetic they become. And then they become citizens who are more understanding of the world around them and the people around them. I mean,
You don't,
yeah.
but you're not going to be able to stop a psychopath or change a
No,
psychopath, are you?
no, but you're not going to come across, I would say, if you taught, I've been doing this 25 years, and I can honestly say one diagnosed, and one that I'm quite sure he's in jail for murder, that were probably in that area of sociopathic, severe conduct disorder. You know, but I've worked in alt ed and residential, and most of the kids I've come across are pretty good kids. They're not crazy, evil, mean, sadistic people. They're just kids who got a bad shake, who never learned how to process things, who have a ton of trauma. So they have a trauma response to things, which is, really, they need to learn some healthy coping skills around that and how to process that. But I haven't come across a lot of kids that were just like terrible people. It's just most of us aren't. Most of us are pretty good people.
So, what are the discipline methods, or, yeah, what are the methodologies that you use in alternative ed that we don't really see in the mainstream?
Well, I don't have a lot of major issues, and I'm in alternative ed. Um, we have a lot of proactive conversations with our kids. We make a goal to build relationships with our kids from the first day they step foot in the door. If we see one little thing out of line, we have a restorative conversation. We pull kids aside and say, "What's going on, man? Like, what's up? What's happening here?" And because we do that, we have a lot of conversations. And I know that's going to sound crazy to people. So you just talk to your kids all the time? Yeah, pretty much. I just talk to my kids all the time. I ask them a ton of questions about themselves. I get to know them. I build that trust level where they can let me know what's going on in their life and how I can help them. And that's what we do. We're just honest with them. We have great conversations with them. And I don't have a lot of major events. I mean, my students do what typical students do. Like we may have a kid throw a paper towel across the classroom, and I'm like, well, that's pretty average. I mean, we're going to have a conversation around that. We don't go, just ignore it. But I'm like, if, my middle school teacher and I were having a conversation and he was kind of struggling. It's his first year. He's like, they talk all the time. And I go, yeah, they're middle school. And I go, are they cussing? He's like, oh, no, no. And I go, are they having like really unhealthy conversations or saying inappropriate things? He goes, no, a lot of it's just kind of silly for the most part. They're just goofy. And I go, yeah. He's like, what do I do about that? And I go, you don't, that's a worldwide phenomenon with middle schoolers from all over the planet Earth. Like, that's what they do. I was like, are they getting their work done? He's like, yeah, they're getting a lot of stuff done. I mean, they do well. They're taking notes and doing all that stuff. And I was like, I could just remind them that, there's time and a place, but don't harp on them or scream at them because they're kids and they're going to do kid stuff. And we don't have any major behavior issues. I mean, even the kids that were bullying the other kid, they weren't physically bullying him. What they'd done is they'd gotten together and they wrote on their arms, F this kid. And I was like, dude, guys, really? And so, and wrote actual F him, not the F word. They just wrote F. And so they're like, at least we didn't cuss. And I'm like, no, I mean, we know what that means. But I mean, that's like a major incident in our school, which in reality, I'm in alt ed school. I've got a ton of kids here for behavioral issues. And that's the biggest issue I could tell you that we've had over the last 2 months is that right there. Other than that, simple stuff. I mean, I had a kid throw a juice box at a kid. We pulled them both out, had a restorative conversation. He was like, I didn't really mean to hit him. I meant to throw it over him. And he's like, well, but you did hit me, and they figured out that it was a complete accident. And, so yeah, it sounds crazy, but we get to know all our kids and we talk to them and we get to know them on a human level.
I think the fact that you talk to them and you speak with them, because I've talked to principals who tell me, yeah, I speak to the kids. We have conversations, and I ask the kids later, so have you ever been in there? And they say, well, yeah. And I say, okay, so tell me about your conversations. It's not a conversation. They talk at us, and then they say, do you understand what I'm saying? We say, yeah. And they say, okay, get out of here. So there's a huge difference. And I think people need to understand that kids want to have a voice, they want to be heard. And sometimes they'll act even worse after they've been with an administrator or a teacher who's just spoken at them because they're so frustrated because they weren't heard, they didn't understand why they couldn't be listened to because there was a good reason for whatever happened, at least in their mind, happened.
Hmm. I think that whenever I have a kid in my office, and I see my teachers do this as well, I think we pride ourselves on how we start conversations. And again, it's never about us. And so whenever we have an issue, one of the first things we ask is, "What's going on? Like, what just happened? Tell me your side. I'm curious. Like, tell me what you think went, what you know." But I have kids in my office. I'm like, "Why are you here?" And they're like, "You know why?" And I'm like, "Well, I know why, but I want to know why you think you're here. I want to hear your side of things. I want to hear what was going on. Like, tell me." And then active listening, a simple thing, paraphrasing, asking, curiosity questions, kind of just simple stuff like, well, why did you throw a juice box? It's like, well, I went to throw it at the kid behind him because he's my friend to get his attention to hit him in the head. Do you think I mean, are we supposed to throw juice boxes? No. So you were throwing it at your friend because you thought it would be fun. Yeah. I'm like, all right. And how'd that work out? Well, I hit the other dude in the head and he got all pissed off. I'm like, totally. Do you think he should be mad? Well, yeah, I hit him in the head with the juice box. But just having those basic conversations, they know what happened. They're not oblivious. And they can own their part. And then you can say, okay, now that we know what happened and you basically know what you could have done differently. I don't have kids that often. They're like, I don't know, what could have I done differently? Almost the majority of the time, they're like, I probably could have done this differently. I'm like, okay, I mean, you could have. It is what it is. It's over now. So now we got to talk about what do we do moving forward. We can't rewind and go redo that, but we can make amends. We can do something with this information that we have and build on it. So what do we do? What do you think we should do? I ask the kids all the time, what do you think we should do? What do you think our next step is? And it's surprising how often they're like, I should probably apologize. I'm like, yeah, but apology is more than just a word, it's an action. So what does apology look like for you? When you apologize moving forward, what's that look like for you back in the classroom? And having them do that sort of metacognitive thinking and that planning, it's because it's not about me. I could tell you what to do. I mean, I'm really good at solving problems. For Pete's sakes, I'm fantastic at it. But if I solve all your problems for you, you're never learning how to do that yourself. And so having those conversations and taking the time and pausing and not thinking, I've got a bunch of stuff to do. I got to move on to the next thing. I need to douse this little fire, although there's still a bunch of embers that are red hot. And I'm going to send you off with those red hot embers. And dear God, hopefully nobody blows on that. You know, let's make sure that we handle the whole problem, deal with the whole child, bring things full circle. And then it makes a huge difference.
And that also goes to what you talk about in the book as KYK, know your
Yeah.
kids.
Know your kid.
So
Definitely.
do you actually say kick?
No, no, no. I tell people, I tell my teachers all the time, like, what do you know about them? Just curious. And they'll say, well, I know this, and that, and this. And I'm like, well, based on that information, what's your perception of what's going on with them? And then if they say, I don't know, I'll say, have you asked them? No. Why don't you ask them? Like, we have this idea that we can't be honest with kids. And we 100% can be honest with kids all the time. Like, they can handle it. We don't want to dump huge, heavy things on them in a very non-therapeutic way. But we could totally be honest with kids and just say, man, you're off today. What's going on? Like, what do you need from me? Do you need to talk to some, because we don't always have to be the savior. We could say, do you need to talk to so and so? I know you got a great relationship with them. You know, we can be honest with kids.
Oh yeah, we can. I What I don't advocate for though is there was an incident where a staff member got in a kid's face
Mm.
and the kid got back in that staff member's face and the staff member said, "You will respect me." And the kid said, "I don't respect you and I don't have to respect you. I will respect these people, but not you." And so they took that kid into a room and basically told that kid all the confidential information that they had on this kid. And the kid just sat there and said, "So?" They said, "I want you to apologize to me now." And the kid said, "Not until you apologize to me." Well, that wasn't going to happen. So the staff member came in and talked to me and said, "What are you going to do about this?" And I said, "Well, you kind of did some of the wrong things that you shouldn't have been doing."
Oh,
And to be quite
100%.
honestly, and to be quite honest, the other kids believe that you have been targeting these kids in the class. And so that was kind of like them telling you, knock it off. "I will not be spoken to that way." And I said, "But that's how you speak to them.
Yeah.
So let me talk to the kid, and then maybe we can have you sit down and have a conversation with him with a moderator who's there between you, and we just come to an agreement or something." "No, I will not. They need to come to me and apologize, or I will not work with them again." And the kid looked at me and said, "I'm willing to apologize. I know what I did was wrong, but I need them to own up to what they did." And and it never happened. It never happened. That staff member absolutely refused. And yet walks around talking about how we do restorative justice. I think that we need to have people be a little more self-aware
Yeah.
that they can't bandy these things about, but they have to be part of the solution as well. And sometimes you have to take your medicine. I know I've done it so many times over 40 years. So, but some people just cannot. And I think those are the people that can't leave it at the door.
Hmm. Yeah. If you're going to be an educator, it's a lot of ego checking because you have to, again, it's not about you. Like, I tell my teachers all the time, our kids get an endless supply of respect and dignity, and their respect and dignity bucket is refilled every morning when they show up. We will never be disrespectful and we will never treat them without dignity. Will they be disrespectful to you? Yes. But cognitively and developmentally, they're in a different place than you. So you can look at them and think in your mind, I totally get that because, you're not always somebody who thinks rationally. Like you're a teenager and based on brain development, you think very irrationally and you're driven by emotion and impulse. And I can understand that and I can forgive you for that because if I stay patient and I'm respectful to you, you will be respectful to me. I had a kid not too long ago. He had a vape on him, and God, I hate the vapes. I just put that out there. The worst thing in the world. But refusing to give it to the teacher, and he came in, and I've known him for a couple of years, and I'm like, look, dude, do we have to do a pat down and get all weird and uncomfortable and have a long conversation about it? Or just and so he gives me the vape, and I go, okay, thank you. And I go, man, I go, let me ask you, you supposed to bring a vape to school? And he goes, no. And I said, let me ask you this: have I ever, in your 2 years that we've known each other, disrespected you or treated you badly? He's like, no. And I go, can you have a little bit more respect for me and not bring a vape to school? And he kind of stopped for a minute. It was like, I mean, yeah, I guess. I didn't know it was like a way of disrespecting you. And I go, it's not. I mean, I don't feel sad that you brought a vape to school. I go, I'm not going to go home and have, like a sad little cry. I go, but dude, it's the rule. And it's the rule that I have to enforce. And you're not old enough to have a vape. I know the cops aren't going to stop you. They're not going to write you a ticket. It is what it is. I go, but man, look, if you could just not like leave it at the door, hide it in the alley. Like, come on, be more creative. but don't bring it to school. And he's like, I could do that. But if you have that level of respect for them all the time, it's not about us. It's not about whether or not we get respected. If you give them respect and you are polite to them and you work with them and you get to know them, then yes. But in the beginning, no. That's the hard part. That's the work that has to be put in. Is you get new kids, and at the beginning of the year, you just have to assume like I'm going to have to put up with a whole bunch of stuff and build a lot of relationships and swallow my pride and check my ego a million times because if I do what I'm supposed to do and I build these relationships and I do some proactive things and I treat this kid with respect, 3 months from now, we're going to have a perfect, well oiled little relationship that is kind of a really respectful give and take with things.